Brenda Whitmore shoved my lake cabin door open with an HOA clipboard in her hand. Her muddy heels crossed my pine floor while two board members filmed my private rooms for an inspection. My dock gate alarm chirped twice behind them, which meant they had also touched the marina control panel outside. That panel controlled every slip on the North Cove. And if they had forced it, half the neighborhood's boats were now locked into my system. Then Brenda walked straight toward my father's locked cabinet. The brass handle rattled under her fingers. That was her first real mistake. The second was smiling at the camera while she did it. I stood in the gravel drive, lake fog hanging around my knees, listening to the faint beep from my phone. The cabin smelled like wet leaves, old cedar, and someone else's perfume. Not cheap perfume either. Brenda wore the kind that filled a room before she entered it and stayed long after she left. I watched the live feed from my porch camera. One angle showed her in my living room. Another showed the HOA treasurer, Paul Denning, standing by my dock controls with a screwdriver in his hand. He kept glancing over his shoulder like the trees were watching him. In a way, they were. I had cameras tucked under the eaves, under the bait freezer, and above the old canoe rack. My father installed the first one after drunk tourists started cutting through our property in the 90s. I upgraded the rest after I inherited the place. I never advertised that. People behave differently when they think no one is recording. The lake was quiet that morning. Too quiet. No kids yelling from the swimming platform. No outboard motors coughing awake. Just the soft slap of water against the dock posts and Brenda's voice drifting through my open cabin door. "Document everything," she said. "He has been refusing compliance for months." He. Like I was not standing 20 yards away from my own front steps. My name is Ethan Walker. Most people around Pine Hollow Lake knew me as the quiet guy in the brown cabin with the old fishing boat. That was fine with me. Quiet kept people honest. Or it showed me who wasn't. I stepped onto the porch, and one of the board members jumped so hard his phone nearly hit the floor. Brenda turned slowly. Her smile did not move, but her knuckles tightened around the clipboard. "You cannot be here during an official HOA inspection," she said. Rainwater dripped from the roof behind me. I looked past her at the open drawers, the scattered envelopes, the cabinet with fresh scratches around the lock. "You broke into my cabin," I said. "We entered under emergency maintenance authority." Her voice was sharp. "Practiced. Too practiced. Your dock wiring is unsafe, your cabin is non-compliant, and your marina access affects community safety." Paul appeared behind her, pale now. The screwdriver had vanished from his hand. But the wet scrape marks on the dock panel were still there. So was the red light blinking above it. Brenda did not notice. She was too busy performing. She raised the clipboard toward my chest like a badge. "You have 24 hours to surrender all cabin keys, dock codes, and access permissions." The wind moved through the screen door behind her. It creaked once. Slow. Thin. Like a warning. Then my phone buzzed again. A third camera had just detected motion near the boathouse. This was no inspection anymore. The motion alert came from the boathouse camera at 9:14 a.m. I glanced at the screen and saw a figure moving between the storage racks. Not a teenager. Not a fisherman. The person wore an HOA volunteer vest. My dock stretched nearly 80 feet into the lake, and from where I stood on the porch, I could see the faint reflection of orange fabric through the fog. Brenda followed my eyes. For the first time all morning, her smile slipped. Just for a second. Then it returned. Too fast. Too rehearsed. That told me more than anything she had said. Behind her, the smell of wet paper drifted from my living room. Someone had gone through boxes they had no business touching. Family records. Property surveys. Old photographs. The kind of things people search when they think they can find leverage. I stepped past Brenda and picked up one of the folders from the floor. The pages were damp from muddy footprints. Paul looked away. Another board member suddenly became fascinated by the ceiling fan. Nobody wanted to explain why private documents were scattered across my cabin. The silence said enough. Outside, the wind pushed small waves against the dock. The rhythmic knock of wood against wood echoed across the cove. Normally I found that sound relaxing. Today it felt different. Like a countdown. Brenda started talking again. Community standards. Safety concerns. Compliance reviews. The same phrases she always used. They rolled off her tongue like lines memorized from a script. What caught my attention was what she did not say. She never mentioned the boathouse. She never mentioned the marina control panel. She never mentioned why someone in an HOA vest was walking around restricted storage areas. That omission stayed with me. Pine Hollow Lake had changed a lot over the years. New houses. Bigger docks. Expensive wake boats. People arrived with money and expectations. My family had been there long before any HOA signs appeared at the entrance road. My father built this cabin with his own hands. Cedar walls. Stone fireplace. Wide porch facing the water. Nothing fancy. Just solid work. The kind that lasts. After he passed, I kept the place exactly the way he left it. Most weekends I came out alone. Fished before sunrise. Repaired dock boards. Maintained the marina systems. People assumed I was just attached to the property. The truth was simpler. Somebody had to keep everything running. A sharp metallic clank echoed from the dock. Every head turned toward the lake. Even Brenda stopped talking. Then came another sound. A gate motor. Slow. Mechanical. Deliberate. My phone vibrated again. Another alert. Access override attempt detected. The message flashed across the screen. Someone was trying to force a command through the marina network. That should not have been possible. Only 3 people had access credentials. Me. The maintenance contractor. And the previous marina manager who retired 2 years earlier. The cold lake air suddenly felt heavier. Brenda noticed me reading the alert. Her eyes narrowed. Not worried. Curious. Like she was waiting to see what happened next. That was when I realized this had started long before this morning. The cabin. Inspection was only one piece of it. Somebody wanted access to something much bigger than my property. Then a boat horn sounded from across the cove. The boat horn echoed across the cove a second time. Long, sharp. Every gull on the shoreline lifted into the air at once. I stepped off the porch and looked toward the marina entrance. A 24-foot pontoon boat was drifting near the fuel dock. The owner, an older man named Carl Mercer, stood at the helm waving both arms. Something was wrong. The access gates that controlled the marina channels were moving. Slowly. One after another. The electric motors hummed through the morning air. Metal chains rattled beneath the docks. Then one gate stopped halfway. Carl cut his engine and stared at it. So did everyone else. The smell of lake water mixed with fresh motor fuel drifting across the cove. Behind me, Brenda remained silent. That caught my attention immediately. Normally she filled every quiet moment with rules and speeches. Now she simply watched. As if she already knew what was happening. My phone buzzed again. Unauthorized credential request denied. The message flashed across the screen. 30 seconds later another request appeared. Then another. Whoever was doing this was not guessing. They knew exactly where to look. Paul suddenly cleared his throat. His face had lost all color. Sweat shined along his forehead despite the cool air. "Maybe there is a technical issue," he said. Nobody answered him. The marina control network had been stable for years. It did not randomly generate access attempts. Somebody was actively trying to get inside the system. Across the lake, Carl finally managed to back away from the partially closed gate. The moment he did, several homeowners emerged onto their docks. People pointed. Phones came out. Questions started spreading faster than answers. That was always how trouble moved through Pine Hollow Lake. A single problem could circle the shoreline before lunch. Brenda stepped closer to me. "Perhaps this is exactly why the HOA needs oversight," she said quietly. The words sounded prepared. Like she had been waiting for the opportunity to use them. I looked at her. Then at the damaged marina panel. Then at the volunteer vest disappearing behind the boathouse. Pieces were starting to connect. Not enough for conclusions. Enough for questions. The boathouse sat nearly 200 yards from the cabin. Weathered cedar walls. Green metal roof. Storage racks for kayaks and maintenance supplies. Nothing exciting. At least that was what most people believed. What they did not know was that the primary network relay sat inside a locked utility room attached to the structure. Only maintenance personnel were supposed to go near it. Yet somebody had triggered motion sensors there twice this morning. The second alert arrived only minutes after the first. Too much coincidence for my taste. A breeze rolled across the water. The American flag near the fuel dock snapped sharply in the wind. Then another alert appeared on my screen. Remote device connected. My stomach tightened slightly. That was new. Somebody was no longer attempting access. Somebody had achieved part of it. Not enough control to operate the system. Enough to establish a connection. Brenda noticed the notification reflected in my sunglasses. Her eyes followed it for half a second. Then she looked away. Too quickly. Another mistake. People reveal themselves when they think they are hiding something. The noise around the lake was growing now. Engines starting. Neighbors talking. Dock carts moving along wooden walkways. The entire shoreline seemed to be waking up at once. Yet through all that noise, one detail stood out. The HOA volunteer who had been near the boathouse was nowhere in sight. Then Carl shouted something from across the water. Carl pointed toward the far side of the marina and shouted again. This time everyone heard him. Somebody was inside the utility shed. The words carried across the water. Conversation stopped. Dock carts rolled to a halt. Even the gulls seemed quieter for a moment. I looked toward the boathouse. The green roof reflected sunlight through the thinning fog. Nothing moved around it now. That bothered me more than seeing someone there. People vanish quickly when they know exactly where cameras are positioned. Brenda folded her arms. Rumors are not evidence, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Carl shook his head from across the cove. He was not backing down. Several homeowners started walking toward the marina access path. The crowd was growing by the minute. Pine Hollow Lake loved two things: fishing and gossip. When both mixed together, nobody stayed home. I slipped my phone into my jacket pocket and headed toward the shoreline trail. The gravel crunched beneath my boots. Damp pine needles released their earthy smell with every step. Behind me, Brenda and two board members followed at a distance. They were pretending to observe. In reality, they were watching me. The trail curved along the water for nearly 300 yards before reaching the marina structures. As I walked, more alerts appeared on my phone. Not warnings this time. Logs. Timestamps. Device records. Small pieces of a larger picture. Somebody had connected to the network at 8:42 a.m. Then again at 8:57. Then once more at 9:11. All before the so-called inspection even began. That detail mattered. By the time I reached the utility shed, nearly 20 residents had gathered nearby. The building itself looked ordinary. Weathered cedar siding. Padlocked service door. Vent fan humming softly from inside. But one thing immediately stood out. The lock was hanging open. Several people noticed it at the same time. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Carl pointed at the latch. That was locked yesterday. Nobody argued with him. He had been docking boats there for 15 years. If anyone knew the marina facilities, it was Carl. I crouched beside the door. Fresh scrape marks covered the metal plate around the lock housing. Tiny flakes of silver paint still rested on the concrete. Recent. Very recent. A homeowner named Linda Foster leaned closer. "Is that from maintenance work?" she asked. Before I could answer, Brenda stepped forward. "The HOA has authority to inspect community assets." There it was again. Authority. She used the word constantly. Like repeating it often enough could make it true. Linda frowned. "This building is not owned by the HOA." Several heads turned toward Brenda. The atmosphere shifted slightly. Not enough to create open conflict. Enough to create doubt. Brenda noticed it too. Her smile returned immediately. That same practiced smile. The one she used whenever facts became inconvenient. The vent fan continued spinning above us. Then I heard something unusual. A faint electronic chirp. Soft. Rhythmic. Coming from inside the shed. I looked at the door again. The crowd kept talking behind me. Nobody else seemed to notice. The chirp repeated 3 seconds later. Not random. Deliberate. Like a device trying to communicate with something. My phone vibrated at the exact same moment. The new notification made me stop walking. Something inside the shed was still connected. Something inside the shed was still connected. I stared at the notification while the faint electronic chirp repeated from behind the door. Device active. External relay detected. The message stayed on my screen for only a few seconds before disappearing. Around me, residents kept talking. Questions bounced from one person to another. Nobody had answers. The smell of sun-warmed cedar mixed with lake water drifted through the marina. Somewhere behind the fuel dock, a radio played old country music. It sounded strangely normal compared to everything else happening. I walked closer to the shed door. The metal handle felt cool against my hand. I did not open it. Not yet. Instead, I looked through the narrow ventilation grate near the roofline. Darkness. Storage shelves. Electrical conduit. Then a tiny blinking light. Blue. Steady. Deliberate. Somebody had placed equipment inside. Linda noticed me staring upward. "What do you see?" she asked. Before I could answer, Brenda stepped between us. "This area is now under HOA review," she announced. Several residents exchanged confused looks. Carl crossed his arms. "Since when does the HOA control marina infrastructure?" Nobody responded immediately. The silence lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. Brenda adjusted her clipboard. Paul avoided eye contact with everyone. Another board member quietly stepped farther back into the crowd. Tiny cracks were beginning to appear. That was interesting. The chirp sounded again. This time Carl heard it too. His head turned toward the building. "What is making that noise?" he asked. Brenda immediately spoke over him. Too quickly. Too loudly. Probably an old maintenance sensor. Her answer arrived before the question had even settled. That caught my attention. People who tell the truth usually wait to understand the question first. My phone vibrated again. Another system log. Another timestamp. The active device inside the shed had attempted communication with the marina network 4 separate times during the morning. Each attempt lasted less than 30 seconds. Short bursts. Efficient. Purposeful. Whoever installed it knew exactly what they were doing. A speedboat passed beyond the no-wake buoys. Sunlight flashed across the water. For a moment, the reflection lit the shed window. I caught movement inside. Not current movement. A reflection. Somebody had recently shifted storage racks along the back wall. Fresh scrape marks cut through years of dust. That was not maintenance work. Somebody had been searching for something. Or hiding something. Linda noticed the marks next. Then Carl. Soon several residents were looking through the same window. Murmurs spread again. Brenda's smile tightened. Barely noticeable. But it happened. We should conclude this inspection, she said. There is no reason for everyone to stand around speculating. Nobody moved. That surprised her. I could see it in her eyes. She was used to giving instructions and watching people follow them. This time the crowd stayed exactly where it was. Questions had replaced compliance. The lake breeze picked up. Flags snapped sharply along the docks. A loose halyard tapped against a sailboat mast somewhere across the marina. Tick. 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 The sound echoed across the water. Then another resident arrived carrying a phone. He looked directly at Carl. You need to see this, he said. His face had gone completely pale. The screen showed a security image captured less than an hour earlier. Carl grabbed the phone first. His eyebrows shot upward. Then he handed it to Linda without saying a word. One by one, people leaned closer. The image was grainy, but clear. Enough. It showed the marina utility shed at 8:39 a.m. A person wearing an HOA volunteer vest stood beside the service door. Another figure stood several feet away near the shoreline. The second figure was partially hidden by a row of kayaks. But everyone recognized the white clipboard tucked under one arm. A hush settled over the crowd. Even the country music from the fuel dock seemed distant now. Brenda glanced at the photo for less than a second. Then she looked away. That proves nothing, she said. Her voice sounded tighter than before. Carl folded his arms. It proves somebody was here before all this started. Nobody argued with him. The timestamp sat plainly at the top of the image. 43 minutes before the first HOA member entered my cabin. 43 minutes before the marina alerts began. 43 minutes before anyone started talking about inspections. The timeline mattered. People could feel it. The wind shifted across the lake. The smell of gasoline disappeared, replaced by fresh water and sun-warmed pine. A few residents stepped away from Brenda. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. That small movement told its own story. Trust was starting to crack. My phone vibrated again. Another system log arrived. This one contained something different. Device identifier detected. For the first time all morning, the network had captured part of the hardware signature from the relay hidden inside the shed. Not a complete match. Just enough information to narrow things down. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. No reason to share that yet. Across the crowd, Paul looked increasingly uncomfortable. His shirt clung to his back. He kept checking the parking lot. Then the lake. Then the parking lot again. Like he was waiting for somebody to arrive. Or hoping somebody would not. The electronic chirp sounded once more from inside the shed. Several people heard it this time. Heads turned immediately. Linda frowned. That is not a maintenance sensor. Nobody disagreed. The sound was too regular. Too precise. Brenda opened her mouth to respond, but another voice interrupted her. Actually, she is right. Everyone turned. A maintenance contractor named Ray Collins was walking up the path carrying a tool bag. Ray had serviced docks and marina equipment around Pine Hollow Lake for nearly a decade. If anyone knew those systems, it was him. He stopped beside the shed and listened. The chirp repeated. Ray's expression changed instantly. That is a relay transmitter, he said. And it definitely does not belong in there. The crowd erupted into questions. Brenda tried speaking over them. Nobody listened. Ray crouched near the door and examined the lock plate. Then he stood slowly. Whoever installed this knew exactly where to put it. The marina suddenly felt smaller. Quieter. More focused. Every loose piece from the morning seemed to be drifting toward the same place. Then Ray looked directly at me. There is something else you need to see. Ray looked directly at me. There is something else you need to see. He reached into his tool bag and pulled out a rugged inspection tablet covered in scratches and faded marina stickers. The screen reflected sunlight as he opened a maintenance log. Several residents stepped closer. Even Brenda leaned forward. Ray scrolled through months of service records. Pump inspections. Gate calibrations. Dock lighting repairs. Then he stopped. One entry sat highlighted in yellow. The date was 3 weeks earlier. The request listed an emergency access review authorized by the HOA board. My eyes moved down the page. The authorization included a request to map every electronic control point connected to the marina network. Gate systems. Fuel monitoring equipment. Dock access panels. Storage locks. Every critical system appeared on the list. Carl let out a low whistle. Linda shook her head. Why would the HOA need any of that? Nobody answered. The lake breeze fluttered the edge of the tablet case. Ray tapped another screen. A diagram appeared. Colored lines connected buildings, docks, relays, and control stations around the cove. One section flashed red. The utility shed. The same building standing 20 feet away. Somebody tried to create a secondary control path, Ray said. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes did not. If completed, they could monitor system activity without using official credentials. A murmur rolled through the crowd. The word sounded technical, but the meaning was simple. Somebody had built a back door. Brenda folded her arms tighter. You are making assumptions. Ray looked at her. No. I am reading logs. That landed harder than any argument. Several homeowners exchanged glances. The atmosphere shifted again. Small pieces of trust continued falling away. My phone vibrated. Another alert. This one came from a different source. Not the marina network. My cabin cameras. Motion detected. Living room. The timestamp was current. My cabin should have been empty. Every HOA member was standing right here. I opened the feed. The image appeared instantly. Sunlight stretched across the floorboards. Open drawers remained scattered around the room. Then a shadow crossed the camera view. Somebody was inside. The person wore a gray hoodie and baseball cap. Their face stayed hidden. The figure moved directly toward the cabinet Brenda had tried to open earlier. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. Patterns were beginning to emerge. The same morning. The same systems. The same targets. None of this felt random anymore. I quietly saved the footage and slipped the phone back into my pocket. No reason to reveal everything at once. Across the marina, Paul noticed me checking the screen. His eyes followed mine. For the first time all day, genuine worry appeared on his face. Not confusion. Not frustration. Worry. Then another homeowner approached the group carrying a printed folder. "I found these in the clubhouse office," she said. The pages rustled in the wind. She handed them to Carl. His expression changed almost immediately. Several property numbers were highlighted. Mine was at the top of the list. Directly beneath it sat a handwritten note. Access priority. Then Carl slowly turned the page. The conversations around us faded almost instantly. Every highlighted property on the list shared something in common. Private docks. Independent utility access. Separate marina permissions. Assets that operated outside direct HOA control. Mine sat at the top. 3 others followed beneath it. Linda leaned closer. "This is not a compliance list." She was right. Compliance reports usually mention grass, paint colors, fences, and maintenance issues. This document looked different. Notes filled the margins. Gate access. Storage rights. Dock controls. Utility connections. Someone had been tracking far more than neighborhood rules. The breeze lifted the corner of the paper. Carl flipped to another page. More addresses. More notes. Some were crossed out. Others had stars beside them. My property had 3 stars. That detail drew several looks from the crowd. Brenda stepped forward. "Those are internal planning documents." Her voice sounded firm, but not as firm as it had that morning. Carl looked up from the folder. "Planning for what?" Brenda opened her mouth. Nothing came out immediately. The delay was small. Everyone noticed it. Across the marina, the water slapped softly against the pilings. The sound seemed unusually loud. Tick. Splash. Tick. Splash. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Ray reached for the folder. He studied the pages one by one. His eyes narrowed. These notes reference infrastructure ownership. Several residents exchanged confused looks. Ray tapped a line halfway down the page. "Look at this." Carl leaned in. So did Linda. The note listed control transition options beside several marina assets. Not maintenance. Not inspection. Control transition. The phrase hung in the air. It sounded corporate. Deliberate. Calculated. The kind of wording people use when they do not want plain language raising questions. My phone vibrated again. Cabin camera. Live motion. I opened the feed without saying a word. The hooded figure was still inside my cabin. This time the person was standing beside the cabinet. A small flashlight swept across shelves and drawers. The figure ignored valuables. Ignored electronics. Ignored everything except documents. That narrowed the possibilities considerably. Then the person pulled out a folded map. My map. One that showed marina easements, dock boundaries, and utility routes around the North Cove. The figure unfolded it carefully. Studied it for several seconds. Then took a photograph. Linda noticed my expression. "What happened?" she asked. I turned the screen toward her. Her eyes widened immediately. Carl saw it next. Then Ray. The reaction spread quickly. Nobody needed an explanation. The image spoke for itself. Someone was actively searching my property while HOA members stood at the marina discussing access rights and infrastructure control. The timing was impossible to ignore. Brenda saw the screen from several feet away. Her face lost color for the first time all day. "Not much," Just enough. The crowd noticed that too. Questions started coming faster now. Who was inside the cabin? Why were documents being photographed? Why were infrastructure maps on an HOA list? Why was a relay hidden inside the utility shed? Nobody seemed interested in hearing about inspections anymore. Then a new voice cut through the noise. I know who that is. Every head turned toward the parking lot. Every head turned toward the parking lot. The voice belonged to Megan Hart, a real estate assistant who handled paperwork for half the properties around Pine Hollow Lake. She stood beside her SUV holding a tablet against her chest. That is Tyler Brooks, she said. He does contract work for the HOA. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Megan walked closer and pointed at the frozen image on my phone. I saw him at the clubhouse twice this week. Brenda immediately stepped forward. That proves absolutely nothing. But the confidence was gone now. Her words landed flat. Megan shook her head. There is more. She opened her tablet and pulled up several archived emails. The bright screen reflected in her glasses. I was asked to prepare property summaries for specific lots. She looked directly at Carl. Only the ones with independent access rights. Carl took the tablet. His jaw tightened as he read. Linda looked over his shoulder. Ray did the same. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The only sounds came from the lake. Water against pilings. Wind through boat covers. A distant engine somewhere across the cove. Then Carl lowered the tablet. These requests came from the HOA board. Brenda opened her mouth. Closed it again. Around us, residents were no longer asking questions. They were connecting dots. The hidden relay. The utility shed. The access lists. The cabin search. The infrastructure maps. The unauthorized inspections. One by one, the pieces fit together. My phone vibrated again. Another cabin alert. I opened the live feed. The hooded figure had left. The room was empty now. But one detail remained. The cabinet door stood open. A folder sat missing from the shelf. The same folder containing marina easement records and control agreements. Exactly what somebody had been searching for. I saved the footage and finally looked up at the crowd. Dozens of eyes were fixed on me. Waiting. Watching. The moment had arrived. I reached into my jacket and removed my badge wallet. The leather snapped open with a familiar click. Sunlight caught the shield. For a second, nobody moved. Even Brenda froze. This morning started as a property issue, I said. It is not a property issue anymore. The lake breeze carried the words across the marina. Nobody interrupted. Multiple locations were entered. Private records were accessed. Restricted systems were targeted. Evidence was collected on camera. Brenda's face went completely still. The clipboard lowered slightly in her hands. Carl looked at her. Then at the others. The realization spread through the crowd like a ripple across calm water. The authority she had claimed all morning suddenly felt very small. Nobody needed a speech. The facts were already standing in front of them. Ray quietly handed me the maintenance logs. Megan offered copies of the emails. Carl held the access lists. Piece by piece, the story had assembled itself. Across the cove, sunlight broke through the last layer of fog. The water turned silver. For the first time all day, nobody was talking about inspections. Then a new notification appeared on my phone, and the name attached to it changed everything.